powers.
What have been the 4 most watched events globally involving this country in the last 3 years?
Yeah, but that doesn't...
No, hang on.
Well, you're going to say the weddings and the Jubilees.
Just answer my question.
You're going to say the weddings and the Jubilees. I'm not sure that's even the case, because I think UEFA had...
well, forget football.
Well, OK, you can't just say forget football.
Well, national events...
National events... most viewed events except...
National events which universally show this country
the coronation,
at its best.
9% of this country were enthusiastic about the coronation, 15% by another poll. So, in terms of royalists, most people... the people that you can genuinely call royalists is less than 15%.
All right, but see, here's the point, I think, which I think both you guys are missing. But, try and convince me, Alex. I just think when the world looked at the Platinum Jubilee, for example, when the world looked in a very different tone at the Queen's funeral, the King's coronation, you look at these events and it shows Britain, in my view, at its greatest. The pomp, the pageantry, the ceremony, the military precision. Everything worked like clockwork. Everyone around the world who was watching this, and as a caveat, many people are not interested, I get that, but the millions, tens of millions around the world that watched it thought better of our country. How many things has happened in our country in the last 3 years involving our leaders, for example, which have brought shame and ignominy to the country? Here, you have a chance to show us at our best. What price do you put on
There's
that?
nothing about the royal family that's brought us shame, in your opinion, that you've been sort of
loads of things.
Relentlessly
As
talking
human
about.
beings,
The idea that the monarchy sits above the politics
they are as
of the
fragile
country,
as any of us.
And you say, it doesn't help us to escape the various political scandals of prime ministers and presidents. Well, does it? I thought you were the one who's constantly banging on about Harry and Meghan and how they're a disgrace to our country or whatever it is. I don't think.
Well, I think rather like you two, their attempts to
claiming
damage the monarchy and bring it down are actually disgraceful because I happen to support the monarchy. But that's a different argument.
A few big events is not an argument for a constitution which is second-rate. It's not an argument for an institution that abuses public money, that abuses public office to lobby for their interests and so on. 13 years ago, 14 years ago now, the MP's expenses scandal. I'm sure you were one of the many commentators who are outraged by MPs spending public money on their own homes, their second homes.
Yeah.
And that was sort of hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, sometimes tens of thousands of pounds. The royals spend millions, tens of millions.
Yeah, but my view of that
our
is
money.
If you're going to have a monarchy and a royal family, and they're performing over 1,000 duties a year,
like garden
which
parties.
is not a lot.
Well, they're actually getting lots of charities and they do a lot of help for people,
Which
right?
they couldn't do as private citizens.
Well, they could, but it wouldn't have the same impact.
Okay.
But here's my point. If you're going to have them, you should give them all the trappings.
Why?
Because otherwise they're not a royal family.
The
they're not a monarchy.
Where's the logic?
The logic is, if you want people to buy into the magic of a monarchy and royal family,
but it's not,
you've got to give them the tools to be magical.
It's not magic, it's corruption.
What would you have them in? A little Tesla?
Maybe a suit. Would be fine. We could start by getting rid of these ridiculous garments. We spent most of the time that we've known
dressed
King
like
Charles
you?
dressed like me.
Come
so to see him for the first time...
You're the king dressed like you. No offence.
Well, he'd probably put on a tie. He'd look more like you, I suppose.
Yes.
To see him suddenly put on these robes would be like watching Rishi Sunak or someone suddenly
but it's part of our history.
Ludicrous robes,
it gives us something so few other countries in the world have.
Nobody can take it seriously.
And you may not like
Nobody
it,
can take it seriously,
but many around the world love it. If you go to the Caribbean, if you go to America, you go to Canada, you go to India, you go anywhere in the world, Australia, and they bring in so much money from tourism.
Well, that's not true.
But it is true.
No, it isn't. That's definitely not true. It's definitely not true. Now, the thing is, there is no evidence. And I've sat down with the CEO and chair of Visit Britain about a decade ago, and I said, there's no evidence that if we got rid of the monarchy, tourism would go down. And they said, yes, you're absolutely
right. You don't think the royal family
brings
in any money from tourism?
No evidence that tourism money wouldn't come in anyway.
If you just look at the money that came in the weeks leading up to these big events that we've had over the last 4 years,
look at the
huge amounts of money.
If you look at the visitor numbers,
American tourists pouring in, Australian tourists, Canadian tourists.
The visitor numbers go down when these things happen. If you look at the visitor numbers, they go down when these things happen.
People stay away from these kinds of things. And if I may say, Cheshire Zoo is a bigger tourist attraction in the UK than Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. I wouldn't be in favour of a state-funded ceremonial opening.
When was the last time hundreds of millions of people around the world on television watched the birth of a penguin at Chester Zoo?
I certainly would not be in favour
of
its owners or its directors, or indeed the sort of sometimes sinister and yet still to be pitied animals that are kept within its cages, given any kind of political office over the rest of us.
When do we beam the lives of the inmates of Chester Zoo to the world?
The whims of tourists are not a good justification for political office.
When's
the thing that
the
tourists are
next
spending
big
money on
event? I mean,
is not
when's
the way
that?
to decide
What
who the head of
about
state's
what
going to
about William's campaign at the moment to end homelessness?
be. Yeah, fantastic. Funded by what?
Funded by us.
And what's this, like 3 million?
It's £3 million
pounds?
You say you don't like his campaign against homelessness?
I think it's
performative.
wonderful.
What
have you got against the
Nothing-
homeless?
It's nothing he couldn't do
Huh?
as a private citizen.
We give him £22 million.
What do you have against the homeless?
What is it?
We give him £22 million. We
Piers,
could spend that on.
You don't want him to help the
That's
homeless.
the most ludicrous thing you've said on this show, and that says a lot.
The bar is low, I agree.
To say that this is something that requires royalty, to say that this is something that requires he has some kind of political office, that he's going to inherit the head of statehood, that he's going to become the head of state of this country, that's got anything to do with his ability
here's my
to
thing.
give £3 million to charity.
I like talking to you
is
guys, right? You
ridiculous.
guys, you argue your case with great passion, but in the end, it's just a negative anti-argument.
No, it's not.
That's what you are.
Not at all.
The pair of you wake up
case-
every day and you think, how do I end this thing I hate? Why don't you just ignore it? It's a bit like vegan. I'll tell you what it is. We're having a vegan debate in a minute. It's a bit like vegans who run into steakhouses screaming abuse about
Well, no,
the
it's
meat.
a bit like-
If you don't like
it's a
meat,
bit like-
just go and eat
it's
your
a bit-
gruel
it's a
in
bit
a little
like-
restaurant in the corner.
It's a bit like saying...
Leave me to eat my steak.
It's actually a bit like getting up in the morning and saying, I want to end homelessness because I hate it. I want to end the monarchy
Quite right.
because it is a bad thing. It's bad for Britain. It's bad for our governance.
bad for Britain.
It's bad for our governance.
And also, for what
not
it's
bad
worth,
for
our image.
2 out
It's
of the
bad.
3
It's
times...
purely ceremonial when it comes to
2 out of the 3 times that I've
But the
ever spoken about
ceremony,
this subject,
the pomp, the
and because you've
pageantry-
invited me to. Those are 2 of the 3 times that I've ever spoken about the subject in public.
Yeah.
It's because you've invited me to. So I don't think it's me who's banging on about this. It's not me who's waking up every day just desperate to see the
Every
end of
time
the
we
monarchy.
call you, you're